I'm Neela Narula, and welcome to our first virtual book club on Roli Pulse, where we discuss Paro Anand's first book for adults, Pure Sequence. And, I've been part of many book clubs, and it's always very difficult to get the author, invite the author, though we send invitation, but, there are times when they are busy or it's too far or they are not in the same city. This is the first time, and because it's a virtual book club, we are lucky that we have the author with us. So I think let's hear from you, Paro, how the journey of this book started.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for doing this, for being on, for being together, although we are all having to be apart. So the journey of Pure Sequence started in my childhood, looking at these wonderful, graceful women, each with their own circumstances, whether it's my nani, my dadi, my masi's, mommy's mother-in-law then later, and how, just the grace of older women, I just loved it so much. So there was this story bubbling up inside me, and that's where it started. The journey actually was lovely because right at the right time, the stars aligned, and I got a writer in residency in Mussoorie, the first writer in residence of the Winterline Foundation in Mussoorie. So I got this little cottage near Stephen Alter's home, and for a month I was sequestered there. There was no internet, there was no landline phone, no mobile connectivity. I had somebody who would come in to do all the cleaning, and somebody who would come to do the shopping if I needed to. And so I wrote like 16, 17 hours a day, and literally within less than a month, actually, the book was done.
Sounds amazing.
Do you want to read something for us from the book?
Yeah, I love it. I love reading from my book. So, Pure Sequence with this lovely cover. Can I just share the story of the cover?
Yes, yes.
There was a beautiful photograph of my Masi, kind of leaning out of a window, and this rose creeper and all, which I love. But the publishers, the marketing people felt it wouldn't be great as a cover. It didn't work. So we were in a rush. The book was ready to come out, and my friend Vindhya Thapar, who was extremely sick and actually dying of cancer, this was the last project that she did. And I think it reflects the book so well. The only trouble is because it's sort of these cartoon-like, and basically I'd been writing children's books. So often this book lands up on the children's shelf. If I go into a bookshop and I find it there, I sneak it out and put it in with adult books. Okay, I'm going to read to you a little bit about characters. Has just lost her husband, and it's a sad moment, but also something. I chose this because is that inner strength, that spine which doesn't bend in older women of that time. So she has just lost her husband. They've just come back from the funeral of the cremation and everything. And then Anu and her husband, Anu is the daughter, Anu and her husband left after many anxious words of advice. Sheila assured them that she would be all right, that she was just so tired that all she wanted to do was sleep. Yes, she was sleepy. It had been a long, long time since she had spent a comfortable night of undisturbed sleep. She had been getting up twice, thrice at night to look in on her husband. He slept on the sofa in the drawing room. He had not wanted to be stuck in a bedroom when he first fell ill. And even when he had slipped into his coma and she brought him back from hospital, she had put him in the drawing room. She didn't, in case he woke up. The doctors had said he wouldn't, but just in case, she wanted him to wake up where he had wanted to be. He had made her promise that he would die first. He said that I can't manage without you. You will be fine. And of course, she had protested. And he said, yes, I know you'll miss me, but you'll cope, you'll manage. And isn't that true of so many women that they can manage? And it's the husbands who really struggle if the wife goes first. She had kept her promise, but she was feeling so much like a grieving widow now, although he had made her promise that she wouldn't live the rest of her life like a widow. She really felt orphaned. Although she was in her 40s, she was still an orphan. And I'm just going to interrupt a moment. When my Nana had passed away first, and then my Nani, and I was coming back from the cremation with my mother. And I said, I held her hand, I said, how are you doing? And she said, I feel like an orphan. And in my mind, this thought jumped up saying, you know, you're a grandmother. Of course, you're not an orphan. Orphans are children. But when I lost my parents, it was that. I was orphaned. There's no getting away from it. As the others left, Sheila told the servants to go and have a rest too. They were tired from all that they had been busy with once her husband had died. She assured them that all she wanted to do was sleep. Now she was in her home at last, alone. She wandered around. The house was deathly still. She had thought she would just go right off to sleep. But the house was too quiet, and sleep fled her eyes. She noticed the air was no longer punctuated with the sounds of her husband's labored breathing. She hadn't realized how omnipresent it was, or how acutely her ears had got attuned to listening for that sound. Like a ghost, as though she herself is dead, she walks through the living room, which has become a death room. She gasps. The floor is still icy cold from all the ice he lay on. No warmth. She moves onto a carpet and is suddenly flooded with memories of how they bought that carpet. Winter had come in early and the house was too cold. A rediwala had come around with carpets rolled up. They had liked a particular one, a green one. They couldn't afford it. They asked him to hang on to the carpet, and they got together old newspapers, buttons, things they didn't need, called in the kabadiwala and sold whatever they could, but they were still a little short. Then the kabadiwala had asked them, do you have a full-length mirror? His son had just got married and his daughter-in-law wanted a full-length mirror. Immediately, Sheila had gone to her bedroom and told the kabadiwala to take down the mirror from her cupboard. Her husband protested and said, no, we'll find some other way. And she said, it's fine. Although she had never tied her sari without a long mirror before. She learned to do that now and never replaced the mirror. And ever since then, their upholstery always matched that green carpet. Sheila wanders about, restless though exhausted. She goes into her bedroom now, no longer their bedroom. She needs to do something. She's not used to idle hands. She goes to her cupboard. She puts her hand on the handle, but she can't bring herself to open his cupboard and see his clothes hanging uselessly. Not yet, not yet. She turns around and there's the trunk that serves as a window seat covered up with a red satin cloth. Yes, that's where she'll start. She goes to the trunk. She pulls the satin cloth off and it lies there like in a puddle of blood-red cloth. She takes the key and opens the lock, which always opens arthritically. She opens the trunk. There are warm clothes there. Yes, that's what she's going to do. She's going to sort out the winter clothes. She starts with hers first, later his. That tobacco-y smell of his clothes, which she hated, it always irritated her. But she's scared to lose it now, almost as though she can't take too deep a breath in case the tobacco smell leaves. And then the trunk is emptying out, two tottering piles on either side of her. Right at the bottom comes her wedding joda, her and his sherwani, folded into muslin and neem leaves. Her old fingers hesitate on the fabric, and then slowly, she reaches in and draws their wedding clothes out. Tenderly, she unwraps the Banarsi brocade sari, the impossibly tiny brocade blouse that seems to have been stitched for a doll. She smiles. She couldn't dream of even putting on a single sleeve now. The satin of the petticoat feels cool and sexy. She shudders with the remembered pleasure of her wedding night. How gentle he'd been, how concerned. He had painstakingly taken the flowers out of her hair, all those pins that held up her jura that was snagging at her hair. She laughs as she remembers how his hand slid up her arms and cupped her face and kissed her for the first time. He would never kiss her again. It was a long time since they'd kissed, yes, but now it was a never again. Fresh tears fell onto the muslin-embraced sherwani. Hurriedly, she wipes them off. She doesn't want it stained with her loss. Tenderly, oh so lovingly, she unwraps the white cloth, traces the trellis design of gold thread on raw silk. Unfolding it, she sees there's a crack growing in the fabric. She must hang it up. She takes a hanger from her cupboard and hangs the sherwani up on his. She opens the top button as she puts the hanger, rubbing longingly on the inside of the silk-lined collar, the collar that was lucky enough to be resting against his skin. She goes back to her sari and picks it up. She steps into the soft satin of the petticoat first. She slips it on, loving that satin against her legs, still sexy. She doesn't need to tie the nada, her belly holds it up now. It's on, and she picks up the sari. The gorgeous golden peacocks on the palla dance as she starts to fold it. And then on a whim, she tucks her kameez up and begins to wrap the sari around her, the pleats falling into place as though they longed to do so. She covers her head with the palla. Bride-like, demurely she turns and steps towards the cupboard where the sherwani awaits its bride. She looks down, steals a coy glance up at her husband, smiling, demure. She reaches in. She lifts both her hands as though holding her jaymala. Her hands rest on her husband's shoulders. She rests her head on his chest and then puts her arms around his waist, lifting the sleeve onto her own shoulder in an embrace. She looks up at him, giggles, flushed, as the empty sleeve brushes her breast as it falls away. She slips her hand up and naughtily opens 2 buttons of the sherwani and slides her hand up. She's shocked to find that it's empty. There's no husband there. Never will be again. Horrified, she steps away and catches a glimpse of herself in her bridal sari. And then she bursts into tears, loud, wailing tears, not the quiet, dignified, graceful ones that were there for everybody else. She doesn't need to be brave and graceful now. She breaks down, howling like a wounded dog, hugs the pillow to herself to stem the loneliness and absorb the pain and loss. Keening with whimpering sobs, she rocks herself into a deep, deep sleep. She dreams of her wedding, red flowers all around. But everybody else is dressed in white except her. She shouts at them, "Why are you in white? It's my wedding. How dare you? Take off your clothes of mourning." They look at her with pity in their eyes. "Why are you looking at me like this?" The Bharat arrives. A cheerful Shehnai strikes up. The band marches on, leading the way for the bridegroom. She rushes to put the Jaymala around her husband. But his clothes are empty. Only his clothes have come for the wedding. Where is her husband? Why is he not here? Bells are ringing at the wedding mandap, temple bells clanging louder and more insistent. Sheila wakes up in a sweat, but the bells keep jangling persistently. Even when she realizes she is awake now, and that was just a dream. It's the front door, ringing insistently, urgent. Someone's at the door. Could it be her husband? Come back one last time?
Oh my God.
I think we could all just picture it all happening as you were speaking.
I read this at the Jaipur Literature Festival, and I noticed there was a lady crying in the front row. She came to me afterwards and she said, "You have a husband?" She said, "He's well." I said, "Yes." She said, "Then how did you know? How did you know this is exactly what happened with me?" And the number of women who have said just this, how do you know? And another very thing that this same lady said is, she says, "Your ladies are so lucky. Your friends," she referred to them as your ladies, "your friends are so lucky. They have each other." She says, "I don't have anyone. I don't have friends like them. I have to go to movies alone."
Oh, that's so heartbreaking. Yeah.
She really wanted Sheila and Satya and Kunti and all as her friends. They were so alive.
I think I should also talk about all the readers who are here. We have quite a few from different places from all over India. So we have Kanika, who's joined us from Kota. Avanti has joined us from Ahmedabad. And Ekta is here from Delhi. Ahana is joining us from Patna. And I am joining from Faridabad. And you are in Delhi. So it's quite a eclectic group of readers who have come together.
Wonderful.
Another thing that I when I was reading the book, and when I was reading the blurb actually, I read this line: learning to cherish their present and not worrying too much about the future, which is so true today. In the sense, this is everybody is talking about it. This is something we all are reading and we all are talking about. But when I was reading this and I read these lines, I felt, oh my God, this is so true. And these kind of thoughts and these kind of things, it's always women, our mothers, our grandmothers who keep telling us these things. I don't remember my dad ever telling me that, but my mother, of course, used to talk about it, that You have to think about your present and not to worry too much about your future.
Yeah. I mean, you prepare for the future, and I think in a very basic, I think women prepare for the future in a very different way from men, or at least used to maybe. Uh, Perhaps there's a greater insecurity for a lot of women facing a future without a man. And so I wanted this sort of sense of strength and companionship that these women draw from each other when they, for one reason or another, are finding themselves alone.
Mm. So are there any characters that you've taken from real life?
I think all of them, shreds and bits of them. Actually, that bit of the, of the Judah and all those pins on the wedding night that I just read. When my middle brother-in-law got married, and I sort of took the bride up to the sort of bedroom and all that, and then said goodnight and left. And months later, when we were friends, and she said, "How I wish that you had stayed a bit for the night and helped me take out those pins from the Jura. They were so painful." When my youngest brother-in-law got married, and I had that in mind, when I went to take his bride up to the bedroom, and so painstakingly I'm taking out the pins. Months later, she tells me, "I was so angry with you for taking them out. I wanted," like she had imagined a romantic thing with okay, you can never get it right. Yeah, as I said, my Nani was such a source of spine and strength. My Masi, who was widowed all my grown-up life, she'd been a widow, but she was so full of life. Yes, she did her prayer and everything, but she was so fun. When I was thinking of this book, I started hanging around in the India International Center and eavesdropping on old people's conversation. And then, what do they talk about? I was such a range of things that they talk about. And I thought, then what about a person who never had that man in her life, but I really wanted to give her a man at the end? And again, that lady at the Jaipur Literature Festival, she said, "Hi, vyah kara dendi na another." I said, "But weren't you happy that she had those friends with her?" "Vyah kara, usna vyah hi nahi karni hoya si. Ikwaate maze dendi." The kiss was not enough for her.
That brings
lovely. Also, what's lovely is, I've had a lot of younger kids, like at the Gymkhana Club. I was reading, and a 12-year-old boy, he came up and bought 2 copies, one for his dadi, one for his nani, for their birthdays. And he said, "Perfect for both of that." I thought, wow, that's really sweet, because he saw them, because he says that, they're just like it. And the number of people who have said, "Oh, I know a group of women just like this," whether they're related or, they're that laughing group in a park that they pass every morning.
Yeah, all 4 characters do feel very lived in and real.
Yeah. Also, that just feeling that it's not the end of your life.
Yeah. But tell me, do you think there's a conflict between companionship as a need or as a choice? Do women have that?
I think you young women who are here on this group definitely have that choice more than women of the kind that I wrote about. Although, like my Masi, who was widowed so early when her children were quite young, it was a choice she made that she wasn't married. I have a bhua-in-law who's not just a bhua-in-law, which sounds like such a distant relative, a great friend. She's my best friend. And she chose never to get married, and it was a choice. She was busy in her career and everything, and that was a choice she made, and she's perfectly happy with it. But I think more and more women can have that choice, although, of course, still that thing of, get married, have the kids, that's still that sequence, the sequence that life is supposed to follow. And then the choice of leaving if it's not working out. That's the tougher choice almost.
Yeah.
And as one of the questions was, they see the abuse and yet they've kept quiet about their own abuse, and we don't even term it abuse. एक आध थप्पड़, अरे एक आध थप्पड़ तो होता ही है. Cops will tell you. I have a number of people where the police have said, ठीक है, मर्द है, husband है, गुस्सा तो चढ़ ही जाता.
Yeah, despite that incident that you describe about Sheila's husband slapping her, and then how Tosh and Sheila confront him, and despite that, I mean, seeing her being such a devoted, I mean, not devoted, but such a responsible partner to him. That was, like, it felt a little, I mean, life is so, I mean, I don't know how it is for a woman that old, but it's so, I mean, their relationship is so long through the years. I mean, maybe that one incident was forgotten, or, I mean, how did that affect, like, it was difficult for me to reconcile those two in their relationship.
At that time, actually, it was kind of par for the course. You didn't leave your husband for that one shove, push, thappad. You didn't. Your choices, I think the choices of these women were so limited in any case. What would they have done on their own? Only sister is the working one. The others are dependent. So the importance of, having your own nest egg, earning, confidence, ability to face the world, these women didn't. But having said that, now maybe it's better. I was hearing about Kabir Singh movie, and I was surprised by what I was hearing, but I'm still on, right?
Yeah.
I'm still on?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Suddenly I got to think that it was unstable. Okay. So I never want to ban something when, without reading it. Like, books have been banned. I didn't read the book, right? My books have been banned, even though the people who were banning it, the parents and all of that in a school. So I said, if I must go in. So I went to see Kabir Singh all on my own, and I was sitting next to a group of young women, obviously, college going or just starting work or something, like that kind of age group. And one of them was literally, literally slurping and saying, he's so sexy, he's so sexy. Talking about Shahid Kapoor in that role. And I asked them afterwards, I said, he's this horrible character. How do you find him sexy? And their reply was, इतना प्यार करता था ना, प्यार में दीवाना था इसलिए.
Of course.
So this is the attitude, right? This is what we have to guard against when we are bringing up our daughters. And you guys need to guard against this, that it's not sexy. It's not when somebody said, "Ye meri bandi hai," or "Tange tod dunga," and all of that, it was horrific. I wrote an open letter to Shahid Kapoor, who's actually to a very wonderful student of mine. She was a student of mine, very bright and all, and it horrified me that her husband would be doing this, this role. Not that he's Kabir Singh. I understand that it was a role. But don't you, as an actor who has that much sway over a populace, have a responsibility to raise red flags? Do the role. By all means. And also because he is the father of a daughter. So do the role. Don't let women come out of the film saying, "That's so sexy." And "Aar mein dewana tha, so sab theek tha." Nahi. Raise the red flags and say, it's not all right. There is damage when there's a situation like that.
Ekta, do you have a question for Paro?
Yeah, I do. I found it very odd and interesting how there would be a stark difference in the way people would behave with Satya and Sheila. So, for instance, Kunti held Satya partly responsible during that meeting that Sheila had called right after her husband's death. So he was saying that, "Sheila, I can understand your mental state. Perhaps you are right now not in the right mental state since you have this is not something that I expected out of you." Then later, Sheila's helper Muni also says, like, she doesn't say it openly, but she thinks that Sheila must be crying because Satya must have done something. So we always absolve widows of the situation that they are in. Always assume that as a widow they are already going through so much. But Satya was a spinster. And I felt that there was this difference in the way the society, the spinster, and the way they behave with widows. So what are your thoughts on that?
That's really a very interesting observation. I'm not sure that it was such an intellectual choice that I made in writing that. I think it was more instinctual, maybe, that the unmarried woman really is at the thinnest end of the stick.
Yeah.
But I mean, it wasn't an intellectual choice. It wasn't a choice that I had made. I think, she became the underdog of underdogs.
Yeah. Yes.
Because I feel even as a society, somebody who's lost her husband, we feel sorry for that person. So that emotion is always there, that we feel sorry for her. Oh, she's alone. But somebody who's not married, we don't have those same feelings for her. Probably somewhere we feel that it's out of choice, or probably, I don't know, maybe some other reason. But somebody who's lost her husband is given that.
Well, a spinster is up for being the butt of jokes, but a widow is not.
Widow is not.
Interesting. Thanks for that observation, Ekta. I'll go back and read the BBC. Sometimes, Ekta, I have to share with you, characters decide things for themselves. I'm not such a tight puppet master at all. Things happen. I'm going to just show you one book. This is No Guns at My Son's Funeral. The brand new cover. This has been rejacketed, and it's going to be relaunched once we're able to relaunch, along with Weed, which is also coming with a new cover. In No Guns, a very weird thing happened. The main protagonist had a sister and a younger brother who were kind of side characters. And when I'm writing, I'm really inhabiting the skin of the characters. So I was so the skin of Aftab, the little boy. And his sister Shazia was kind of a shadow flitting in and out of the narrative. It's way, way into the book, into the manuscript, that suddenly I realized that she was playing a much more important role without Aftab knowing about it. And because Aftab didn't know, I didn't know, because I was in his skin.
Yeah.
And I was like, really? And I went back and read the manuscript again and found that she'd been up to her tricks. And I didn't know. Even as a writer, I didn't know. So I think somewhere this thing of...
I can understand, because it's not always possible to I was saying that as a writer, I can understand that it is not always possible to place self in multiple shoes at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I most of my writings, I have one central character who I kind of am very focused on. And in this, there were all of these women, this group of women. And so I was juggling between them. But somehow, yeah, this thing about Satya, as I said, I didn't realize that this was happening so much to her.
I was saying, Avanti, if you want to share your observations.
Yes, I would love to. As soon as I started reading the book, the first thing that struck me was my mother-in-law is in Delhi and she's a widow. And so the characters were immediately endearing to me because it reminded me of her and her group of friends. Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to express was, as a woman, I don't know whether it's just me or other women as well, I have always striven to be fiercely independent, as in wanting to protect myself and giving myself the armor of being okay, even if alone. And when I was reading about Sheila and what happens to her, the way she breaks down when she loses her husband, my expectation was, my expectation, I don't know if expectation is the right word, but I was wondering what is going to happen to her now. How is she going to handle it? Of course, she has to be strong. It's okay to be alone, to live alone in that big house. She has a bunch of friends. It's okay. She will be fine. But then she surprised me by openly expressing without inhibitions that she wanted her friend Satya by her side. And I mean, as a writer, you made me feel, the reader, that it is okay. It is okay to want that. And I was telling my husband exactly about that part of the story. And I was telling him how when her husband becomes bedridden, and then when he dies, that entire part of the story, she just went through it like a soldier. And when she loses her husband, all of a sudden, she's jolted back right at the time when he was alive and everything was fine. And now she doesn't know how to carry on. And then she has that friend by her side and it's okay. And that was great.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. When my Nana passed away, and my Nani had been married at the age of 13. And he passed away when she was, I think, 74, 75 or so, when he passed away. So she'd been married from 13 to when she was 74. So it was the center of her world fell away. And somehow that destabilized her for a while, but she somehow found another way, another axis around which she could spin the rest of her life. It didn't break her completely, she'd been married all her grown-up life. And he was the center of her universe. And suddenly he was gone, So it was, and he was always the stronger one. She was always the frailer one. Yet he went first. This is something that she used to keep repeating, that he used to worry about me. I never worried about him. But yet he went first. But I think that was really a pivotal moment for me for this book, that how women find a new access, and how the strength and grace of your friends. And I love that, Avanti, that you're saying that she demanded it and she wanted her there, and that it's okay to demand that companionship. I think that's beautiful. The book was actually initially called, as when I wrote it, it was called The Balle Balle Biddies. And then, Neelam, you'd recall that marketing people felt it would be very North Indian, and maybe it would resonate, but they really are the Balle Balle Biddies. Balle Balle through it all.
But I feel that for women, it's easier to find that access for themselves as compared to men when they are left alone.
Yeah.
When they lose their partners later in life. Men find it very difficult.
At the time, I mean, the generation that this book is about, there was a 7 to 10 year gap between the husband and the wife, right? There was this big gap. Chances of the husband going first were much higher because of that, right? But now where that age gap reduces, I'm in fact older than my husband, maybe something else will start happening. I don't know.
So Paro, what next for adults? Any new books?
Yeah, I'm working on a book, and I was told by my publisher, don't talk about your books till you've written them, because somebody will just take that and run with it. So yeah, I am writing a book.
Okay.
On menopause.
Oh, nice.
That's an interesting topic.
Yeah.
But not, I mean, it's a work of fiction, it's a novel. Again, I think a group of women, or it basically is one woman, and the stories that happen, including her discovery that God is a man and not a woman. She's been through all this crap from a young age, right? Sort of from getting your period and then having to wear those uncomfortable bras, and then all those cramps and everything that you get every month.
Yeah.
The childbirth and everything. When it's over, damn it, let it be over. What the hell is menopause? I feel so angry at night when I'm getting these night sweats and my skin is crawling, and I think, what the So, yeah, God is a man. If it was a woman, menopause wouldn't happen. So that's the kind of book it's going to be. Yep. If I can just introduce you to this book as well. I'm not butter chicken. You can't order me. It's a collection of short stories, some serious and some funny. And the title, I'm not butter chicken, you can't order me, this line came whole, and I knew exactly that it was going to be a fight between a daughter and a father, and she says this to her dad and everything. But when I sat to write it, it turned into a very strange, spooky story. Very weird and completely not what I had planned at all. And then I didn't know how to end that story. So I called my daughter. I said, have a look at it. What should I do? And she said, just leave it as it is. Leave it in this strange and unhinged kind of space. And then I asked my son to read it, and he also said, just leave it. So I left it and I shut down my computer. And when I came back to it a couple of days later, I switched it on. The story was gone except the first paragraph. It's not been saved.
God.
And then I wrote the story as I had meant it to be, of this fight between father and daughter. But a very funny thing about the title. So one day I was teaching in a school, doing a program called Literature in Action. And by the way, I do a podcast called Literature in Action. So do listen into that as well. So I was in this school running a program called Literature in Action. One day a teacher comes in weeping, like literally buckets. And everyone said, what happened? What happened? She said, oh, these children nowadays, they're so rude. They're nasty, and I don't know where they get these things from, smart mouths and all. Where do they come up with these lines? And they said, what did this kid say? And he said, I'm not butter chicken, you can't order me. They get it from, and I'm thinking, whoops, he got it from the book. I also have this book called Wingless, a fairly weird fairy tale, which I have done a reading on the podcast. That's the newest podcast. It has fabulous illustrations.
Atanu
Roy, one of his best illustrators. So do have a look at these books too. Maybe we can do another chat like this of those.
Yeah, why not?
We would love to.
We would love to.
Thank you, Paro. Thank you, Ekta, Kanika, Avanti, and Ahana, for this wonderful, wonderful first book club meet that we had on Roli Pulse. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
If you have more questions, write them into Roli and I'll be very happy to answer them.
Definitely.
Yeah.